Welcome to the deep dive. Looks like someone sent us a whole stack of cybersecurity stuff this time.
Oh, yeah.
Especially about Delinea and how they look at authentication and authorization.
Okay.
Yeah, we got like excerpts from their website. There's this blog post that caught my eye about monitoring in just-in-time environments.
Interesting.
And then someone even sent us a bunch of Bert Blevins videos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, covering everything from MFA to PAM.
Cool.
Oh, and one of the videos even mentioned cloud identity discovery.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Do you? What is that?
Cloud identity discovery is, well, it's pretty fascinating.
Okay.
It really shows you how broad security is these days. But we can get into that a bit later.
Yeah.
I think the main thing you're interested in is Delinea.
Right.
And how they handle this classic authentication versus authorization problem.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
I mean, I get the basic definitions, but Delinea says they don't treat those as like two totally separate things.
Right.
How does that even work?
Well, they take a more holistic approach than you might see from other vendors.
Okay.
What Delinea does is they kind of bake authorization right into the authentication process. So they're not just checking who you are. They're also figuring out what you should be able to do based on a bunch of different factors.
So it's not just like checking your ID at the door and then you can go wherever you want.
Exactly. It's more like having this dynamic security system that's always checking your permissions based on who you are, what you're trying to get to, even the context of your request.
That sounds super complicated.
Yeah, can be.
Can you give me like a real world example?
Sure. Think about like a bank.
Okay.
Say you're a customer and you're trying to log into your account online. Delinea's system would verify your identity.
Of course.
But it would also look at things like the time of day, your location, your normal transaction patterns.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you suddenly tried to move like a ton of money from somewhere you've never been before, the system might flag that as risky. And then ask you for more authentication.
I see.
Like maybe a code from your phone or something.
So it's like having a really smart security guard. Who's always thinking ahead. And looking for anything suspicious.
That's a great way to put it. And this ties into another big thing Delinea talks about. The principle of least privilege.
Okay, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
But remind me what that means like in real life.
Basically, it means only giving users and systems the absolute minimum access they need to do their jobs. No more, no less.
Makes sense.
It's like giving someone a key to their office, but not to the whole building.
Right, but how do you figure out what that minimum level is?
Yeah, good question.
Seems like there's a lot of room for error there.
There is, and that's why Delinea really focuses on automation and intelligent tools to help companies manage these permissions. For example, they have this thing called role-based access control.
Okay.
Or RBAC for short.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So it groups permissions together based on what someone's job is.
Oh, I see.
Instead of giving out individual permissions, you just assign people to roles like marketing manager or system administrator. And each of those roles comes with a set of access rights.
So it's kind of like those preset keyrings we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do you make sure those preset roles are accurate?
Right.
I mean, people change roles sometimes.
Of course.
Projects change and new stuff comes up all the time.
That's true. And that's why it's so important to constantly monitor and adjust things.
Okay.
Delinea's systems not only enforce those initial permissions, but they also keep track of what users are doing, looking for anything unusual. So if someone keeps trying to get to things outside their role,
I see.
That could be a sign that something's wrong. Maybe they need their permissions reviewed, or maybe it's even a security risk.
So it's not just a set it and forget it thing.
No, not at all.
You have to be constantly evaluating and adapting to keep up with how things change in the business.
Exactly. And this dynamic approach is super important when you think about the threat of insider attacks.
Yeah, insider threats are scary.
Definitely.
One of the things you sent me mentioned just-in-time permissions.
Right.
Is that how Delinea tries to deal with that specific problem?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Just-in-time or JIT permissions take that least privilege idea even further.
Okay.
Instead of giving permanent access, JIT gives you temporary access only when you need it. And then it takes it away as soon as you're done.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a really smart approach.
So can you walk me through how that works? Like what makes those permissions get granted and how are they revoked?
Sure. So think about a developer
who
needs to get into a production server to deploy a new code update. With normal access controls, they might have permanent access.
Even if they only need it once in a while?
Even if they only need it like once a month.
Wow.
But with JIT, they would request access only when they're ready to do the deployment.
Okay.
The system would double check who they are.
Right.
Make sure their request is legit.
Yeah.
And then give them temporary access, maybe for a set amount of time or until the update is finished.
I see.
Once they're done, their access is automatically revoked.
That sounds way more secure than just having people with access they don't really use.
It is much more secure.
But how does Delinea handle the verification part?
Right.
Is it just usernames and passwords?
No, they actually use multi-factor authentication, or MFA, as part of JIT.
Oh, wow.
So even if someone gets hold of your login info, they still can't get in without that extra step.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer of security.
So this could really cut down on people misusing access, whether it's by accident or on purpose.
Yeah.
But setting up JIT permissions for a whole company must be a huge project.
It can be, yeah.
That's why Delinea has solutions to make it easier.
Okay. They've got tools that help companies define policies for JIT permissions, automate the whole process of giving and taking away access, and of course, monitor everything for anything fishy.
So it's not just about the tech, it's about having the right processes and rules in place too.
Absolutely. And it's also about getting people on board.
Yeah. How do you do that?
It can be tricky.
I bet.
Because some people might feel like the system is always questioning them. You're right. It's not just about the technology.
Yeah.
It's about building a culture of security awareness.
Okay.
Where everyone works together, and Delinea gets that. They offer resources and training to help companies teach their employees
about JIT permissions.
Yeah, and how important they are for keeping things secure.
This is all starting to make a lot more sense.
Good.
I'm seeing how Delinea's approach is more than just basic authentication and authorization.
Huh?
It's like building a smarter, more dynamic, and ultimately safer environment.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key point from the stuff you sent.
Okay, what's that?
The importance of always keeping an eye on things.
You mean monitoring?
Right. Even with all these great systems in place, you still need a way to make sure everything's running smoothly.
We talked about monitoring with JIT permissions. But is there a bigger picture here?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
It seems like with all these security layers, monitoring would be kind of redundant.
I can see why you think that.
Yeah.
But continuous monitoring is even more important in these complex environments.
Okay.
Because security isn't a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process. Even the best system can be bypassed.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Configurations can change, new vulnerabilities can pop up.
Okay, so you're saying it's about always being on the lookout for any little changes or weird things that could signal a problem.
You got it. But how do you even start to monitor something as big and complicated as a modern IT infrastructure?
Right. Well, that's where CIEM systems come in.
CIEM?
Yeah. Stands for Security Information and Event Management.
Okay.
They basically collect and analyze data from all over the network, looking for patterns and anything out of the ordinary that might point to a security incident.
Okay, so like the eyes and ears of the security team.
That's a great way to put it.
Constantly scanning for trouble.
Exactly. But we're talking about a massive amount of data here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
How do you even make sense of it all?
Right, and not get buried in alerts.
That's the big challenge with CIEM, filtering out the noise and finding the real signals.
Right.
And Delinea's approach is pretty advanced.
Oh, yeah.
They use machine learning and AI to analyze the data, prioritize alerts, and even automate some of the responses.
So it's not just humans staring at screens all day.
Yep.
It's about having smart systems that can do a lot of the work, leaving the security analysts to focus on the really serious threats.
It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Right.
And Delinea understands that security is about more than just technology. It's about having the right people, the right processes, and the right tools all working together.
This has been so helpful.
Glad to hear it.
I'm really starting to appreciate how much goes into Delinea's approach to security.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
It's definitely not just about basic authentication and authorization.
Nope.
It's a whole interconnected system designed to protect sensitive data and critical infrastructure.
You got it. And that brings us to something that's especially important these days: machine identities. Did you know that software applications and systems need their own authentication and authorization too?
Wow, I never even thought about that.
It's a whole other world.
So we're not just talking about humans accessing stuff anymore.
Not anymore. In today's world, machines are talking to each other constantly.
Right.
And those conversations need to be secure too.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this connects to everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's all connected.
But how do you apply those same concepts to machines?
Right.
They don't have usernames and passwords, do they?
That's right. Let's dive into that in the next part of our conversation.
Okay, machine identities.
Yeah.
Now we're talking.
Right.
This is where things get really interesting.
It is.
It's like this whole hidden world of digital stuff happening that we never think about.
It's true. We interact with the results all the time, though. Like how?
Well, think about something simple, like your phone updating its apps.
Okay.
Or your smart speaker adding things to your shopping list. Behind the scenes, that's all machines talking to each other.
Right.
And each one needs to prove who it is and get permission to access different resources.
So it's kind of like the authentication and authorization we talked about for users.
Exactly.
But how do you even apply those concepts to machines?
Yeah. It's a little different.
I mean, they don't have usernames and passwords, do they? Nope. Instead of passwords, machines use digital certificates and keys.
Certificates?
Yeah, they act like unique digital fingerprints.
Oh, okay.
So they can prove their identity to other machines.
And I'm guessing not every machine should be able to access everything.
You got it. That's where the principle of least privilege comes back in.
Right. So it's not just about verifying that a machine is legitimate. It's also about controlling what it can do once it's connected.
Exactly.
I bet this gets super complicated, especially in big companies with tons of machines talking to each other.
Oh, yeah. It definitely can get complex.
So how do they manage it?
That's where Delinea comes in.
Okay.
Their solutions give you a central way to manage and secure all those machine identities. They can find and catalog every machine identity on a company's network.
Wow, so it's like a digital census.
Yeah, kind of like that. And then they can set up policies to control their access and permissions.
So like a digital traffic cop.
Ah, I like that.
Making sure all the machines are following the rules.
Yeah, a very good analogy. And this is especially important when you're talking about privileged access management, or PAM for machines.
PAM for machines. Okay, now I'm really lost.
It's like this. Just like some human users have special privileges to access sensitive systems, some machines need higher levels of access to.
Okay, so like the VIPs of the machine world.
You got it.
So what kind of machines are we talking about here?
Well, think about the servers that store all that sensitive customer data, or systems that control critical infrastructure like power grids.
Wow, yeah, those are important.
Right. Or even the machines that manage other machines on the network.
Okay, I see what you mean.
If someone got into those privileged machines, it could be a disaster.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So securing these machine identities is just as important, if not more important, than securing human users.
But all the traditional security stuff is about firewalls and antivirus software.
Right.
How does any of that help with this machine identity problem?
That's where Delinea's PAM solutions are different.
Yeah.
They go beyond those basic security measures and focus on securing access at a much deeper level.
How do they do that?
They control and monitor access to these privileged machines, making sure that only authorized users and systems can interact with them.
So it's like having a security guard at each VIP machine.
Exactly.
Carefully checking everyone who comes near.
You got it.
Oh.
And this level of control is really important these days.
Yeah, with all the hackers out there.
Right. Attackers are constantly trying to find weaknesses and get into sensitive systems.
You mentioned earlier that Delinea's approach involves finding and listing all machine identities. But is that even possible?
It's a challenge for sure.
It's got to be like trying to count every grain of sand on a beach.
It can feel that way, especially with the cloud.
Right. More and more companies are using cloud services now.
Yeah, and that makes things even more complicated.
Because now those machines aren't in the company's office anymore.
Right. They're out there somewhere in the cloud.
Spread across who knows how many data centers all over the world.
Exactly. And that's where cloud identity discovery comes in.
No, I remember.
You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, one of the videos talked about that.
It's all about finding and mapping all the identities that exist in a company's cloud environments.
So it's not just knowing what machines are out there. It's also about knowing where they are.
Right.
What they're connected to.
Yeah.
And what permissions they have.
Exactly. And this process can be tough because cloud environments are constantly changing.
I can imagine.
New identities are being created and deleted all the time.
Wow. So you need some serious tools to keep up with all that.
You do.
Okay, so cloud identity discovery is a pretty big deal.
It is, especially as more and more companies move to the cloud.
But what happens if you don't have a good handle on your cloud identities?
Well, the consequences can be pretty bad.
Like how bad?
Let's say a hacker gets into just one machine in your cloud.
Okay.
If you don't know what other identities are out there and what they can do, that hacker could easily move around your network and get to sensitive data or critical systems.
So it's like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for the attackers.
Yeah, a perfect analogy. They can just follow the trail right into your network.
That's scary.
It is, and that's why cloud identity discovery is so important.
It's about knowing what's in your cloud,
right,
understanding how everything is connected, and putting the right security in place to stop attackers from moving around.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm seeing how cloud identity discovery fits into all of this.
Good.
It's all about layers of defense, securing access at multiple points.
Right.
And making sure only the right people and machines can access the things they need.
You got it. And that brings us back to continuous monitoring.
All right. We talked about that earlier.
Remember how we talked about SIEM systems finding weird activity?
Yeah, they're like the security guards of the network.
That's right. Well, and the cloud monitoring is even more important.
Really? I thought cloud providers like Amazon and Microsoft already had good security.
They do, but security in the cloud is a shared responsibility.
What's that mean?
It means the cloud provider is responsible for securing their infrastructure.
Okay.
But companies are responsible for securing their own data and applications.
So you can't just trust the cloud provider to handle everything.
Nope, you have to actively monitor your own cloud environment.
Looking for any signs of trouble.
Exactly. And that means monitoring not just users and machines.
What else?
But also how the cloud services themselves are configured.
Oh, right.
Because misconfigured cloud services are a major cause of security breaches.
Wow. I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed by all this.
I know, it's a lot to take in.
It seems like securing all of this, especially with the cloud, requires a ton of expertise.
It does.
More than most companies have in-house.
That's a valid point. Cybersecurity has become incredibly complex.
Yeah, it's a whole other world.
And keeping up with all the latest threats and technologies is a challenge for everyone.
So what can companies do?
That's a good question.
Do they just have to accept that they're always going to be vulnerable?
No.
Not at all. There are things companies can do to improve their security.
Okay, good.
And that's something we could talk about in the last part of our conversation.
Man, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have.
From how Delinea handles authentication and authorization, to all that stuff about machine identities,
right,
and the challenges of securing things in the cloud.
It's a lot.
I'm starting to get a sense of just how complicated cybersecurity really is.
It is definitely complex.
But it's also kind of fascinating.
It is.
So where do we go from here?
Well, that's the good news.
Okay.
There are actually proven strategies and solutions out there.
That's good to hear.
To help companies navigate all this complexity and build a strong security posture.
That makes me feel a little better.
Good.
What are some of those key strategies?
We've touched on a few already.
Like what?
The principle of least privilege, multi-factor authentication, just-in-time permissions, continuous monitoring.
Right.
Those are all essential parts of a good security strategy.
But to really stay ahead of the game, companies need to be more proactive.
Proactive?
Yeah, and take a more holistic approach.
What does that look like?
It means moving away from just reacting to incidents and towards anticipating threats and trying to stop them before they happen.
Makes sense.
And it's about understanding that security isn't just IT's job.
Right.
It's everyone's responsibility.
So you're saying it's about building a culture of security awareness.
Exactly.
Where everyone understands how important it is to protect sensitive data.
That's right.
But how do you actually make that happen?
Well, it starts with education and training.
Okay.
Employees need to know what the risks are. What could happen if there's a breach?
Right.
And the simple things they can do to protect themselves and the company.
Like what kind of things?
Oh, things like recognizing phishing emails, using strong passwords, reporting anything that looks suspicious.
Right, those are everyday habits.
Exactly, they can make a big difference.
But it's not just about education, is it?
You're right, you also need the right systems and processes in place.
To support those good habits.
Exactly, and that's where solutions like Delinea's come in.
Okay, how do they help?
They provide tools and technologies that can automate a lot of the security tasks.
Which would normally be done manually.
Right, and that's where human error can creep in.
Makes sense. So what kinds of things can they automate?
Oh, things like managing user access, enforcing password policies, monitoring activity, detecting threats.
So it's about finding that balance between human vigilance and technology.
You got it. You need both for a really effective security posture.
But even with all that in place, breaches can still happen.
Unfortunately, that's true.
So what happens then?
That's where incident response comes in.
Okay.
It's about having a clear plan
Right.
to quickly contain and fix a security incident.
So no panicking and running around like a chicken with its head cut off.
Exactly. You need a calm, collected, and coordinated response.
A good incident response plan outlines who does what, who to call,
Right.
what steps to take,
Yeah.
and how to figure out what caused the incident.
It's like a fire drill for your IT systems.
So you're prepared for anything.
That's the goal. But incident response isn't just about putting out fires.
It's also about learning from them
Exactly.
and improving your defenses to prevent them from happening again.
You got incident response is a chance to find vulnerabilities.
Right.
Make your security stronger and improve your processes.
So you're even more resilient next time.
That's the idea. This whole conversation has been really eye-opening.
I know, me too.
It really shows how cybersecurity is not just a technical problem.
Right.
It's a human problem, too.
It's about people, processes, and technology all working together.
That's a great way to put it. And as technology keeps changing,
Right.
so will the cybersecurity landscape.
Yeah, we're always going to be dealing with new threats.
That's true.
It can feel a little daunting,
I know what you mean.
but in a way, it's also kind of exciting, right?
It is. It's like a constant game of cat and mouse.
Yeah, with the good guys and the bad guys trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly. And that's what makes cybersecurity such a dynamic and rewarding field.
I can see that.
There's always something new problems to solve, new ways to make a difference.
Well said. I think we've covered just about everything in this deep dive.
I guess so too.
From the basics of authentication and authorization to all the complexities of the cloud and incident response.
Right.
It's clear that Delinea is really leading the way in tackling these security challenges.
They are doing some amazing work.
This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
and for helping us understand this ever-changing world of cybersecurity.
My pleasure. Remember, the journey never really ends.
Right.
It's all about constantly learning, adapting, and staying one step ahead.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay secure.
Couldn't say it better myself.